in previous session, we have seen the sensation. The next topic in our psychology, that is our perception. So the sensation, that means when we have seen the external stimuli, when our sense organ has came into contact with the environment and they have received some external stimuli and they have forwarded that external stimuli to our brain. So now from this brain, the interpretation of the information will be there, and what we have sensed, that is going to be interpreted, and that based on that interpretation we are going to behave. So that is your perception. So sensation is just a receiving of your information, but perception is received information that we are going to be interpreted, and that will be interpreted by your brain, and based on that interpreted information we are going to react or we are going to behave. So that is your perception. So the first initial thing is what is going to take place is your sensation. So sensation is your initial response to external stimuli, and after that sensation the perception will be there. The interpretation of that information will be there. So the perception is very important to give a meaning to your sensation. Once we have sensed something from the environmental stimuli, but right now we have just sensation, we don't have any meaning to that particular sense thing, but the perception will help us to give meaning to our sense stimuli. So that is your perception, and that will see. So you can see in this image the two individual is there. So this is your external stimuli. They have seen this external stimuli, and this external stimuli was sensed by them. So that is the sensation. After that, this girl has this what she has sensed, that was brought to the brain, and the interpretation of this information was done, and that information was result in the meaning, that she has said that yes, 6 is written over there. So likewise, that is the perception. The first thing or initial thing what we are going to see, what we are going to do, that is our sensation, and after that to that sense things we are going to give some meaning. So that is our perception. So that is very important, that what we have sensed, we have given some meaning to that, and we have responded based on that interpretation. So that is our perception. Let's see definition of perception. So what is perception? Perception is an individual's awareness aspect of behavior. That means it is making us aware about something what we have sensed from our external stimuli. So that is the awareness aspect of human beings' behavior. For it is the way each person processes the raw data he receives from the environment into meaningful patterns. So 3 things that gives a awareness to our behavior. At the same time, what raw data we have collected from our environment, from our external stimuli, the perception is going to give meaning to that particular data. For an example, we have seen in this image that we have sensed this external stimuli, but right now it is a raw data, we don't know what we have sensed, but after that information, when that will be passed to your brain and interpretation will be done, and that interpretation, that means your perception is going to give meaning to this. That means this girl is replying that yes, this is the 6th letter or 6th number. So that is called as your perception. Perception gives meanings to our sensation. So very simple definition of perception we have: the way each person processes the raw data he receives from the environment and the meaningful pattern into what we have perceived from our environment. So that is your perception. This definition is given by R.E. Silverman. So this definition we can understand from this image as well. So this individual has observed this external stimuli which is present in his environment. So that sense has triggered this eye, and eye has forwarded this sensation to occipital region of your brain, where the interpretation of this information has been done by this occipital region, and that interpretation has made him understand that he is looking at this tree. So that is called as your perception, giving meaning what we have sensed. So that is your perception. So for this perception, we have the different areas in our brain. For an example, for hearing interpretation, we have the temporal region. For this visualization, we have the occipital region. So our different areas of our brain, different surface areas of our brain is going to interpret this information for our perception. So that is about your perception. Next is principles of perception. Now, on what principle our perception is work? So here we have some principles on what principles our perception work. So one by one we'll see all this. The first one is your principle of figure-ground relationship. Figure and ground relationship, that is our first. The next principle is our principle of grouping or organizing something in groups. So that is our grouping. The next principle is our principle of context. That means a content or a context in which we are going to think. The next principle is principle of contrast. Contrast, that means two contradictory things or two opposite things. So that is your contrast. And the next and last one is your principle of your adaptability. That means the acceptance of that perceived thing. So adoption of that perceived things. So based on all these principles, our perception is going to work. One by one, we'll see all these principles. So the first principle is a principle of figure-ground relationship. That means the relationship between the figure and the ground. So figure and the ground, will understand this with the help of image later on. Let's see. So you can see this is my figure and this is my ground, that is the background. So that is, this is the background and this is my figure. This is my figure and this is my background. So that is your figure-ground relationship. Let's see what is this figure-ground relationship. According to principle of figure-ground relationship, a figure is perceived in a relation to its background. That means whenever we are perceiving something, any objects or anything, what we are perceiving, we are going to associate or we are going to relate that particular object with that background, on what it has kept or on what it has drawn. So that background we are going to associate with our figure. So that is based on this principle our perception work, that is our figure-ground relationship. The perception of the object or a figure in terms of color, size, shape, intensity, etc. depends upon the figure-ground relationship. That means whenever we are perceiving any object, we are at the same time looking for the background of it, and we are differentiating and we are relating this figure at the same time this background, and based on that background and that figure, we are identifying the color, shape, position or size or intensity of that particular perceived object. So that is your figure-ground relationship. So for an example, you can see the individual perception might be varies in this figure-ground relationship principle, based on this figure-ground relationship principle. So you can see the first one. So this is my first figure. So this is my figure and this is my background. So when one individual will take a glance at this image, they are going to correlate with this background at the same time this image, and we can identify that yes, someone's face has been drawn here. So that is your figure and this is your background. At the same time, if we discuss, as we have seen that all the individuals' perception might be different, perception might don't be the similar. So the second individual, if they are looking at this figure, they might have separate this figure and they have taken this background as their figure. So that is the different perception. At the same time, see, in this background also this figures gives a different result. So when as this background will be different, at the same time the figure is going to be, the image or perception of that figure is also going to be changed. So this is the three different perceived images in relation with their background. So as the background will be changed, the image will be perceived something different. So that is based on your first principle, that is your principle of figure ground relationship. That means figure is having some relationship with your ground or a background. Let's see the second principle of your perception, that is your principle of grouping. So whenever we are perceiving something in perception organization, we are going to group something. So whatever things we are seeing, so people are having or perceivers are having tendency to group that particular things or group that particular stimuli in your environment. So that is the principle of grouping. Let's see. According to Gestalt principle, objects can be perceived meaningfully when they are grouped together. So for an example, if I am observing any object in my environment, if I'll group there, it will be easy for me to give particular meaning to that observed thing, to my perceived thing. So that is going to give the meaning after this groupism or this organization. The following principles make our perception more meaningful. So for this groupism, another principles also we have. Let's see this one by one. So the first principle in this groupism principle is your proximity. So you can see. So when this image we are going to perceive, the perceiver is going to group these bars or group this standing line. So this is the one group of standing line, second, third and fourth. So instead of telling that we have the 8 standing lines, the perceivers are going to tell that we have the 4 groups or 4 columns or 4 bars of the standing lines, and in each bar or in each column we have 2 lines. So that is called as proximity, the nearer object, proximity in the sense of nearer thing. So the proximal things or a nearer object, that we are going to make a group of that. So it will be easy for us to give meaning to that particular image. So that is the law or a principle of your proximity based on your grouping principle. The another grouping principle is your similarity. So based on that similarity or based on that differentiation, we can identify or we can perceive the images. So based on this similarity, we can say that two columns we have for our triangle and one column we have for our round or for our circles. So perceivers are going to group some similar things. The things which are similar, they will make one group for that. The another group they are going to make for another similarity things. So from this cluster of this triangle and circles, we are going to group that things, and this is how we are going to interpret our informations or we are going to give meaning to that information. So that is the similarity. Similar things we are going to group it together. So that is. The next principle of grouping is your continuity. That means when there is a continuity, when there is continuous pattern, it is easy for us to understand or to perceive it. So this perception organization. So in this continuity, we are not telling that yes, this one standing line is having the round circle upward, the round circle downward, again the round circle upward, again the down circle downward. Instead of that, we are perceiving it as a one standing line and one curved line together. So that is the principle of continuity. When the things are continuous, it will be easy for us to perceive it, or it will be easy for us to give a meaning to that things. So that is the law of continuity. So the next principle of your grouping is the law of closure. So name itself suggests closure. That means anything which is similar in nature. So you can say the scattered lines are here. So this, at that time, what spaces are there, we are going to fill the sensory gap with our sensation, and that is called as your law of closure. So though these lines are not clearly giving us a picture of the square, here we don't have the lines, but imaginary gap we are feeling, the sensory gap. By using our sensory gap, we are calling this image as a square. We are calling this image as our circle or round, and this is our triangle. So in principle of closure, whatever things or objects we are perceiving at that time, we are going to fill this sensory gap of that particular images or particular objects. So that is about your law of closure. The next is law of symmetry. That means some similarities are there. So this symmetry, so you can see this is the bracket, this bracket is similar. So we can say this one bracket we have, this two bracket we have, and this is also a bracket. So that brackets are there. So that is the law of symmetry. So this law of groupism or law of grouping will help us to give meaning to our perceived things. So perceivers are going to group that all the objects we are similar in nature. They are going to fill the sensory gap. So that is in your closure principle, the proximity, and by using all this law, they are going to group all these things, and that will give a meaning to our perceived things, to our objects or to our external stimuli. So that is the second law. It was your principle of grouping. After that, the another law we have, or another principle for your perception we have, the principle of context. So when we are going to perceive something, we are going to work on the context of that. So here you can see those two things. This is your answer sheet. Examiners is checking this answer sheet. So one answer sheet you can see, obviously this answer sheet is very pleasant, and the another answer sheet you can see that is very unpleasant. So the examiner is going to perceive this answer sheet, and based on the perception they are going to give the ranking to that answer sheet. So for an example, for unpleasant answer sheet in the relation to this context, they are going to give a low marks or a low grade to this answer sheet which is very unpleasant in the context. At the same time, this answer sheet which is a very pleasant, and based on the pleasant context of that answer sheet, they are going to give a high mark or highest mark to this answer sheet. So that is the principle of context. The another principle we have, that is principle of contrast. That means two opposite things are there. So whenever there will be the contrast or something opposite will be there, at that time it will lead our attention very quickly on that particular object. So for an example, both these images you can see, A image and B image. So you can see in this image the circles are there, and in middle circle is also there, but that middle circle is not that much different compared to the surrounding circles. At the same time, if you will see this second image, in this second image, the middle large circle is surrounded by a very small circle, which is something different or something deviated. So that will lead our attention very quickly. So that is another perception based on our contrast. So this is the principle of your contrast for the perception. Next we have the principle of adaptability. That means perception of organization. What we are perceiving, that will be based on the perceiver's adaptability. What a perceiver thinks to adapt, or what I am willing to adapt, or what I am accepting. So based on that our perception will work. For an example, one individual wants a bright light for studying or for doing any kind of work. So that bright light is their adaptation. They are going to accept this bright light. At the same time, the individual who is adapting this bright light, the natural sunlight might be dim for the individual for doing any work. So that is the principle of adaptability. If we don't accept anything, so that is our another perception, and based on this adaptability we are going to perceive something, we are going to adapt something. So that is the principle of adaptability. So these are the principle of your perception. The next we have in perception, that is our factors affecting perception. Now when we are perceiving something from our external environment, at that time there will be so many factors which are going to affect that perception, which will increase the perception level, or which might be decreasing that perception, or because of that factors our perception might be faulty, or might be varying from time to time or at the extent. So that is the factors, and here we have the some factors. So the first factor is your sense organ. So obviously, because sense organ is helping us to sense something, to send that signal to our brain, and from that brain only the interpretation will be done. So if our sense organs are not working properly, if we have deficiency or deformity in our sense organ, that will affect our perception, because the proper information from that external stimuli or sense organ is not receiving, and they are not able to send that information to our brain. And because of that, if the brain is not getting the sufficient information, the correct information, the interpretation will go wrong. So for an example, if our eye is receiving the light or any objects from that environmental stimuli, so that light, if we don't have the corn cells properly working, our corn cells are not properly working, then again we won't be able to interpret the information properly in the dark room. So that is the sense organs. If any deformities in sense organs are there, that is going to affect our perception. At the same time, as we have seen in our definition, that brain is having the different areas, or the different surface areas of our brain is going to work on different informations or different senses. So for an example, if the particular area of the brain is damaged or deformative, at that time we won't be able to interpret that information. For an example, if my temporal region of the brain is having some disturbance or any deformities, at that time I won't be able to hear properly. If my occipital region of my brain is having some deformity or any abnormality, it won't be able for me to interpret the visual information. So that is the brain. The next is your memory images of the past experiences. The memory images of past experiences means whenever we are perceiving something, our past experiences or our memory which we have in our brain, that is going to reflect in that perception. We are going to correlate our past experiences with our present psychological conditions or present psychological state. For an example, if we are going to see, for an example, one children is there who has seen the cow, priorly who has seen the cow and who has aware about how the cow looks, but he has never seen the horse. If we are going to show them a horse, at that time he is going to perceive that horse as a cow, because the horse he has never seen. So that is, so what is our past experiences, that will be correlate with our present psychological state, and we are in our current perception we are going to add that events, or we are going to add that memory. So that is the memory images of the past experiences. The next factor is our personal interest and mindset. For an example, anything in which I am very much interested, I am going to quickly perceive that. If I need something badly, if my dreams are there which is related to that perception, I am going to adapt it very quickly. So that is personal interest. If the perceiver is personally interested in anything which what he or she is perceiving, so in that thing it will be easy for them to perceive that scenario and to give meaning to that external stimuli. So that is personal interest and mindset. The next factor is our acquired interest. So same like our personal interest, our acquired interest. For an example, the one individual is interested in playing cricket, so they will perceive this cricket very quickly. So our acquired interest, in what area we have interest, that things it will be easy for us to perceive very quickly. At the same time, the next factor which affects our perception, that is our needs and desire. So what we need in our life or what is our desire, that is going to reflect in the process when we are going to perceive something. So our needs and desire will help us to perceive something in a different way. So these all are the factors which is going to affect our perception somehow. And because of that, it will be easy for us to perceive something, or it will be difficult for us to perceive something. So that are the factors which is going to affect our perception. Next, if we talk about, there will be some errors while we are doing the perception. So here we have the errors in perception. If a perceiver is perceiving something, this type of errors might be there. Let's see what type of errors are there. So illusion, that means in the presence of external stimuli, we are perceiving that information in a wrong way. For an example, if this is the rope and one individual is perceiving this rope as a snake, so that is called as your illusion. The external stimuli is present, but because of something, because of any other environmental stimuli, or because of any abnormality in that, because of any physical illness in that individual or any mental illness, that individual is perceiving this rope as a snake. So that is called as your illusion, and that might be the result of any environmental stimuli. For an example, the area might be the dark, this rope might be placed in a dark room, so that's why they have interpreted this rope as a snake. So that might be the chances. So let's see what are the causes of this illusion. So as we have discussed, inadequacies of sense organs. If my sense organs are not working, if my eyes are not working properly, if I have some deformity in my eyes, so I may misinterpret this rope as a snake. So that is, the next thing is distance of the object. That means where I am standing and this object is very far from where I am standing. So in that condition, the distance also matters. We won't be able to perceive that particular object. So that is the distance of the object. And the last one is perceived notions and expectancy. For an example, if I am expecting something to be there instead of this rope, if I am expecting the snake to be there, so at that time, based on my acceptance, based on my expectancy and based on my behavior also, my perception might be faulty. So that is your illusion. In the presence of any stimuli, we are not able to perceive that stimuli exactly as it is. False interpretation of the information will be there. So that is illusion. If we talk about another error in your perception, that is your hallucination. So what is your hallucination? In illusion, the stimuli was present and we were misinterpreting this stimuli. But in this hallucination, the stimuli is not present. See, you can see there is no any stimuli. But then also this man is assuming there are some stimuli. Someone is talking to them, someone is there with him who is trying to talk with him or who is calling him. So that is your hallucination. When in absence of any stimuli, there will be misinterpretation. So that is called as your hallucination. So if we talk about our hallucination, it has different types, like hallucination, auditory hallucination, visual hallucination, gustatory hallucination. So if I have visual hallucination, though the images are not there, though no one is there with me in that room, I'll sense that someone is there with me. I'll be able to see someone. So that is my visual hallucination. auditory hallucination, no one is talking to me, then also I'll feel like that yes, someone is talking to me, someone is telling something in my ears. So that is my auditory hallucination. Gustatory hallucination, that means I haven't ate anything, then also I'll have some taste in my mouth. So that is my gustatory hallucination. So this type of different hallucinations we have. Even the touch or tactile hallucination also we have. No one is touching me, then also I'll sense like someone is there and someone is touching me. So that is my tactile hallucination. So this hallucination might be there because of any psychological disease condition or any abnormalities, substance abuse disease condition, and this type of things can lead to this type of hallucinations in the individual. So that are the errors in your perception. Next we have causes for inaccurate perception. What are the causes and because of what our perception is not going in a correct track? So that is the causes for our inaccurate perception. Why are misinterpreting these things? So let's see this functioning. The first one is defective functioning of sense organ, as we have seen in errors, that if our sense organs are defective, we won't be able to perceive the things exactly as it is, and we won't be able to give the meaning to that things. So that is. The next thing is inadequate stimulus. Inadequate stimulus in the sense of, we have seen in the characteristics that absolute threshold. To perceive something, we need a minimum stimuli. We need the minimum stimuli must be there. If the minimum amount of that stimuli is not there, very light or very dim thing is there, we won't be able to perceive it. So that is inadequate stimuli. If stimulus is not adequately present, at that time we won't be able to give the accurate perception. The next is too many stimuli at one time. For an example, someone has told to see something at that time, if we are perceiving something, but at that time so many things are there. So we won't be able to focus on very important things or very particular thing. So when there will be so many stimuli at that time, for an example, too much noises are there, too much things are there, the crowded area is there, the dark room is there. So in this type of environment, with maximum stimuli, we won't be able to perceive the correct one, or it will be misinterpretation or inaccurate perception for us. So that is the next cause for inaccurate perception is your poor health. If we are not healthy enough, if we are in a poor health state, if we have any long-term or any acute illness, at that time our sense organ won't work properly, and because of that we might be giving the inaccurate perception. So poor health is also affects the inaccurate perception. Then the next is your limited attention. If we are not able to focus on something, if we have the focus area of other things also at the same time, so at that time so many focus area we have, if we are not able to pay attention on a particular thing, so limited attention, that also might be the cause of this inaccurate perception. At the same time, the next is your figure merges in the ground. When we have the ground, but that figure and that ground both are same in the nature, both are same in color, shape, intensity, size and everything. So that figure is going to merge with that ground and we won't be able to perceive that exactly as it is. So inaccurate perception will go. So that is the figure merges in the ground. At the same time, and last one is your guidance. If we don't know what to perceive, if we don't have a proper guidance, what we are here to perceive, what information or what stimuli we have to perceive, at that time our interpretation might be inaccurate. So for accurate information or for accurate perception while we are doing, we need a proper guidance that what the things are there or what the stimulus is there, what we are going to perceive. So that is your inaccurate perception. So here we have all this causes for our inaccurate perception. At last, next again at a very important point of our perception, that is our nursing implication of perception. How this perception will be helpful for the nurses. So as we have seen, our sense organ will help us to receive the information and our perception will help us to interpret that information. So for the nurses are working with the patient. So it is very important for nurses to be a keen observer. Nurses should be a keen observer. Nurses should have the quality to observe each and every smallest things of our patient. And after that sensing or after perceiving that things, we are interpreting that information. For an example, the vital signs, your blood pressures, your heart rate. So these all are the vital parameters. So what we are sensing, what we are examining for our patient, and we are interpreting that yes, this is the high, this is the low. So likewise, and also for the critical patients, it is very important to identify this things which is abnormal in them. So if the patient is critical, again it becomes a very important for nurse to observe each and everything and to perceive all the things accurately. So for that, there is a need to integrate all the sense organ at the same place at the same time. Then and then only it will be possible for nurse to receive the information and to interpret the information, because the critical patient is that we are receiving all the informations and we are interpreting. We have to immediately inform to our doctor that yes, this vital signs or blood pressure is dropping or like that. So that's why in nursing it is very important to do this perception correctly. So nurses should be a keen observer, and a good interpretation of the information is very important. And for all that things, all the sense organs should be in a proper working conditions. So that was about our perception.